At 22 worse. Greenwich Mean Time on Tuesday, June 9th, the United States military began hitting Iran. Not for the first time, not as a surprise, but harder, faster, and across more targets simultaneously than anything since the war's opening strikes 100 days ago. Qeshm Island, Sirik, Jask, Bandar Abbas. 4 locations along the Iranian coastline of the Strait of Hormuz struck in waves that lasted 3 hours and ended just before 1 in the morning. The trigger was an American Apache helicopter, one of the most sophisticated attack and reconnaissance aircraft in the United States military's inventory, shot down over the Strait of Hormuz. The crew was rescued. The helicopter was not. And before the wreckage had even been located, Donald Trump had already written on Truth Social the words that activated the response. The United States must, of necessity, respond to this attack. Within hours it did, and Iran responded to that response, and the entire Middle East woke up to sirens. 100 days into the most significant American military operation in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq, the war that was supposed to be over in weeks has just entered its most dangerous single 48-hour period, since the opening strikes killed the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic on February 28th. To understand what happened in the past 24 hours, and why it matters more than any individual exchange in this conflict so far, you need to understand the precise sequence of events. Because the sequence is not random. It is not a simple cycle of action and reaction. It is the expression of a strategic logic that both sides have been operating under since the ceasefire collapsed, and that logic is now moving toward a resolution that neither negotiators in Doha nor mediators in Islamabad have been able to intercept. It begins with an Apache. The AH-64E Apache Guardian is not a surveillance drone. It is not a cargo aircraft. It is a weapons platform. Armed with Hellfire missiles, a 30mm chain gun, and the most advanced target acquisition systems in rotary wing aviation, the Apache is what the United States sends when it needs to project lethal capability with precision in contested airspace. When Trump wrote on Tuesday morning that an Apache was on patrol over the Strait of Hormuz, he was describing something specific, not a transport flight gone astray. A combat patrol over the most strategically sensitive waterway on Earth, a body of water that Iran closed in February and that the United States has been trying, through military pressure and an operation called Project Freedom, to reopen. The Apache was not lost. It was on a mission, and Iran shot it down. The Iranian position, stated immediately through Foreign Minister Abbas IRGC, was that foreign military forces operating in proximity to Iranian territory were, in his precise words, at constant risk on account of their own human errors, plain accidents, or potentially being caught in crossfire. The recommendation, he added, was for them to leave. It was a statement designed to create ambiguity, to frame the downing of an American military aircraft as an accident, a consequence of proximity, something that America should have anticipated by simply not being there. It was not believed in Washington. It was not accepted. And the response made that explicit within hours. United States Central Command announced the strikes with 3 words that were chosen carefully: self-defense strikes, proportional response, unjustified aggression. Each phrase was a legal and political declaration as much as a military one: self-defense. Because of that framing does not require congressional authorization under war powers, frameworks that Iranian legal teams have been exploiting in American domestic political debates for weeks. Proportional, because the United States was not trying to restart the full-scale bombing campaign that ended with the April ceasefire. Unjustified, because Washington was putting on record, for every mediator and every observer, that this escalation originated in Tehran. Not in a decision made at CENTCOM or in the Oval Office, in the decision to fire on an American military aircraft over international waters. The targets selected for the retaliatory strikes tell the story of what Washington was actually trying to accomplish. Qeshm Island sits directly in the Strait of Hormuz. It is home to IRGC naval facilities, drone launch infrastructure, and the ground control stations that coordinate Iran's maritime harassment operations against commercial shipping. The strike on Qeshm was not symbolic. It was the direct removal of the operational nodes that Iran has been using to make the strait a kill zone. Sirik and Jask are port installations along the Iranian coastline where IRGC fast attack boat squadrons are based. These are the vessels that have been the primary instrument of Iran's maritime harassment campaign, the armed speedboats that swarm commercial tankers, that planted mines on vessel hulls, that fired on shipping under the cover of the strait's geography. Bandar Abbas is Iran's largest naval port on the Persian Gulf Coast, home to submarine pens, missile storage, and the headquarters of the IRGC Naval Command for the Hormuz Theater. Hitting all 4 simultaneously in a window of 3 hours was a message about American targeting capability that was aimed not just at Tehran, but at every government in the region watching. But here is what makes the past 48 hours qualitatively different from every prior exchange in this conflict. Not what America hit, what Iran hit back. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps issued its retaliation statement within hours of the American strikes. It was not a statement describing attacks on American forces in or around Iran. It was a statement describing 21 separate attacks against American and Allied military infrastructure across 3 sovereign nations: the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, the Ali al-Salam Air Base in Kuwait, the Al-Azraq military base in Jordan, with long-range missiles the IRGC said were aimed specifically at F-35 fighter jet hangars, and the American Command and Control Center at that facility. The IRGC also announced the shoot-down of an MQ-9 Reaper drone over the city of Jam in southern Iran, a high-value surveillance asset worth over $30 million. In a single retaliatory salvo, Iran simultaneously threatened the operational headquarters of the United States Navy's Persian Gulf Command, 2 forward air bases used to stage strike aircraft against Iranian targets, and the intelligence infrastructure, providing targeting data for American operations over Iranian territory. All of the projectiles were intercepted. Bahrain's air defense systems engaged. Kuwait's army announced it was shooting down hostile aerial targets over its territory. Jordan stated it had successfully engaged and destroyed 5 incoming Iranian missiles, with shrapnel from interceptions, causing no reported casualties or infrastructure damage on the ground. The American military confirmed no casualties and no damage to any of the bases targeted. And yet the operational and strategic significance of what Iran attempted cannot be measured only by what was destroyed. It must also be measured by what was revealed. In a single coordinated strike package, Iran demonstrated that it retains the will and the operational capability to simultaneously threaten American military infrastructure across 3 countries, reaching targets over 1,000 kilometers apart with a combination of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and one-way attack drones. The interception success of American and Allied air defense systems was real and significant, but the simultaneity of the strikes, the specific targeting of F-35 hangars and command centers by name, and the speed of the retaliation reveal an IRGC planning structure that, despite 100 days of sustained American and Israeli strikes on its military infrastructure, has not lost the capacity for complex, multi-vector offensive operations. This is the detail that should make every analyst watching this conflict pause. Because the American narrative since Operation Epic Fury began on February 28th has been a narrative of progressive degradation, of air defenses dismantled, of command structures decapitated, of missile stockpiles depleted, and much of that narrative is accurate. Iran's military capacity has been significantly reduced from its pre-war baseline. The strikes that killed Ali Khamenei and 40 senior IRGC commanders on the first day of the war removed institutional knowledge and command continuity that cannot be rebuilt quickly. The nuclear facilities at Natanz and Fordo were struck. The precision-guided munitions production infrastructure that the IRGC spent years building in Lebanon and Syria has largely been destroyed. The air defense network that the IRGC believed could protect Iranian airspace was systematically dismantled across the first weeks of the campaign. And yet, on the 100th day of this war, Iran shot down an American Apache helicopter, fired 21 attacks at American bases across 3 countries, and its foreign minister issued statements that read, not as the communications of a defeated regime seeking terms, but as the communications of a government that believes it still has enough leverage to fight its way to a better negotiating position than unconditional surrender. A historical parallel makes the strategic logic that Iran is operating under immediately recognizable. In the summer of 1950, the Korean People's Army crossed the 38th parallel and drove United Nations forces to the Pusan perimeter, a defensive pocket in the southeastern corner of the Korean peninsula that represented roughly 10% of South Korean territory. By every conventional military measure, the war was effectively over. The North had won, and yet General Douglas MacArthur executed the Incheon landing, a flanking amphibious operation that reversed the entire strategic situation within weeks. By October 1950, United Nations forces had advanced to the Yalu River on the Chinese border, at which point China entered the war, and what had appeared to be a complete American victory became a 3-year conflict that ended in an armistice, not a peace treaty, at essentially the same line where it had started. The Korean War's central strategic lesson, absorbed by every military planner since, is that the appearance of decisive victory and actual decisive victory are not the same thing. A defeated adversary who retains the will to impose costs can convert a military victory into a political stalemate if the victorious party cannot sustain the cost of achieving final resolution. Iran is operating on exactly this logic in June 2026, not because it believes it can defeat the United States militarily. The IRGC command knows it cannot. The war's first week made that unambiguous, but because it believes that if it can keep imposing costs long enough, at a level that is painful but below the threshold that triggers a full-scale American ground campaign, it can outlast the American political will to sustain the operation. Every Apache that goes down, every oil tanker that gets harassed, every American family that pays higher prices at the gas station because of the Strait disruption, Every soldier's name added to the list of American war dead, now at 4 since February 28th. Each of these is a deposit into the account of American war fatigue. And Iranian strategic doctrine, which has studied American political behavior since 1979, believes that account fills faster than American planners acknowledge. Trump's statements over the past 24 hours tell you exactly what he understands about this dynamic, because they are not the statements of a commander-in-chief conducting a war on a predetermined military timeline. They are the statements of a political leader managing two simultaneous pressures that pull in opposite directions. On one side, the military imperative to respond to Iranian aggression with sufficient force to deter the next attack. On the other, the diplomatic imperative to reach a negotiated resolution before the war's economic impact becomes a domestic political crisis that his opponents can use against him. The same day Trump authorized strikes on Qeshm and Bandar Abbas, he told ABC News he believed the response should be very strong and very powerful. And on Wednesday morning, after Iran's retaliatory strikes on Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan, Trump posted that Iran would pay the price for taking too long to negotiate a deal. Those two statements, made within hours of each other, reveal the contradiction at the center of American strategy in this conflict. You do not threaten military punishment for slow negotiation unless you are simultaneously pursuing negotiation. And you do not simultaneously pursue negotiation unless you are not certain that military pressure alone will achieve the outcome you need. The negotiations are real. Qatari mediators were in Tehran on Wednesday, even as Iranian missiles were in the air over Jordan. Pakistan's prime minister has been the primary channel between Washington and what remains of Iran's leadership structure after the February 28th decapitation strikes. Trump himself said on June 4th that he would be open to a direct meeting with Mojtaba Khamenei, Iran's new supreme leader, the man who has not appeared publicly since his appointment in March, who was confirmed by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to be wounded and likely disfigured in the opening strikes, and whose whereabouts, according to reporting, citing senior sources, include the possibility that he was evacuated to Moscow for medical treatment. You are negotiating with a country whose leader is wounded, in hiding, possibly abroad, and has not been seen publicly in over 90 days. And that negotiation is not producing results, because the gap between what Washington requires, the verifiable end of Iran's nuclear program and the permanent dissolution of the IRGC's offensive regional infrastructure, and what Tehran can offer without the regime's complete ideological surrender, remains unbridgeable by any formula that mediators have been able to construct. This is the structural trap from which neither side has found an exit in 100 days, and the Apache helicopter incident, for all its tactical significance, is another expression of the same trap, rather than a resolution of it. Look at what both sides have demonstrated in the past 48 hours, and you can see the trap clearly. The United States has demonstrated that it can strike Iranian military infrastructure across the Hormuz theater at will, with precision, within hours of an Iranian provocation, and that it can do so without sustaining casualties. American air dominance over the Strait is real and has been proven repeatedly. The Iranian interception claim regarding 2 hostile aircraft destroyed over Bandar Abbas and Qeshm remains unconfirmed by American sources, and is assessed by most Western analysts as IRGC information operations rather than confirmed kills. The operational picture in the Hormuz theater favors Washington decisively in kinetic terms. Iran has demonstrated that it retains the will to escalate, the operational capacity to conduct multi-vector strikes across 3 countries simultaneously, and the political determination to absorb American retaliation without capitulating to the negotiating terms Washington has set. 21 attacks launched against American bases in a single night. An MQ-9 Reaper claimed shot down. Long-range missiles targeted specifically at F-35 hangars. This is not the behavior of a military command on the verge of collapse. It is the behavior of a military command that has accepted the costs of the current exchange as sustainable and is betting that Washington's political timeline is shorter than Tehran's pain threshold. Both assessments can be correct simultaneously. American military superiority is real. Iranian strategic resolve is also real. And when both are true at the same time, the result is exactly what we are watching. A conflict that cannot be won quickly enough to match the political timeline of the side with the military advantage, and a conflict that cannot be survived indefinitely by the side with the strategic resolve. The question is which timeline expires first. The honest accounting of where this stands on day 101 requires acknowledging something that the American political narrative around this war has been reluctant to state clearly. The Center for Strategic and International Studies published an analysis on June 8th confirming that the high expenditure of key munitions during Operation Epic Fury has created what their analysts called a window of vulnerability, a period during which American strike inventory must be rebuilt before it returns to the levels that war planners require for sustained high-intensity operations. This is the operational reality underneath the political rhetoric. The United States has the most powerful military in human history. It is also a military whose precision-guided munitions stockpiles are not unlimited, whose industrial base was not designed for the consumption rates of a sustained peer-level conflict, and whose resupply logistics require time that a politically time-pressured administration may not have in abundance. Iran knows this. Iranian military planners read the same analytical publications that American planners read. The timing of the current escalation cycle, beginning in early June as the war crosses the 100-day mark, is consistent with a deliberate Iranian strategy of probing American resolve and capacity at the precise moment when Western analysts have publicly confirmed a window of reduced American strike inventory. The Apache was not simply shot down. It was shot down in a specific context. And in that context, it was a test. Trump's response was, by every visible indicator, exactly what the political and military situation required him to produce. Immediate, forceful, multi-target, publicly attributed to Iranian aggression. Legally framed as self-defense, it checked every box that the domestic political situation and the deterrence logic of the conflict demanded. And yet, it did not close the Strait of Hormuz. It did not destroy the IRGC's remaining retaliatory capacity. It did not produce a ceasefire agreement. It did not surface Mojtaba Khamenei from wherever he is conducting what passes for Iranian leadership. In the aftermath of the most devastating military strike in the Islamic Republic's history, the strikes were necessary. They were not sufficient. The coming days will determine whether the Apache incident becomes a footnote in the conflict's escalation spiral or the triggering event for a qualitative shift in American strategy. Trump's statement that Iran will pay the price for taking too long to negotiate contains within it two possible futures. In the first, the threat produces the acceleration of negotiations that he intends. The Qatari channel and the Pakistani mediators use the fresh demonstration of American willingness to strike to extract concessions from Tehran that move the talks toward a framework agreement. In the second, Iran reads the strikes as confirmation that America is not prepared to escalate to the level required for decisive outcome. And the IRGC uses the 101st day of the war the same way it has used the previous 100. With patience, with asymmetric pressure, with a calculated bet that every day the war continues without a decisive American move is a day in which Iranian strategic resolve is being vindicated. History does not record a single case of an armed conflict ending with both sides simultaneously satisfied with the outcome. One side always pays more than it calculated it would when it made the decision to fight. In this conflict, after 100 days of Apache helicopters, Qeshm Island strikes, midnight sirens in Bahrain, intercepted ballistic missiles over Jordan, and 101 days of oil prices above levels that American households feel directly at every gas pump and every grocery receipt, both sides have now paid considerably more than their initial calculations suggested they would. The question that will determine the next chapter of this war is not whether more strikes will happen. They will. The question is whether the political leadership on both sides has reached the point where the cost of continuing exceeds the cost of the compromise that neither side wants to accept. That calculation is being made right now in Washington, and wherever Mojtaba Khamenei is recovering from his wounds, and in the rooms where Qatari and Pakistani mediators are constructing the framework that might, if both sides' political pain thresholds align at the right moment, convert a ceasefire into something that resembles a settlement. The Apache brought both sides closer to that threshold. Whether it pushed either side across it, we will know in days, not weeks. We will be here tracking every development as the situation evolves hour by hour. If this level of analysis is what you have been looking for, subscribe to the channel. We are also available on Spotify for those who want to follow this conflict on the move. Thank you for watching.